to Good Game, the show for gamers, by gamers. I am Hex.
Bajo.
And this week we go hunting monsters in the Wii exclusive Monster Hunter Try.
And we go hunting monsters. In dungeons, in the Diablo derivative Torchlight.
Plus, we meet a repairman whose mission in life is to keep old consoles up and running no matter how old they are, as well as analysing our top 5 most mesmerising mouth mains in our 5 Up on Gaming Moustaches.
But first, can you guess the game for this week?
News time, Badge.
Ah!
Good game.
The famous American film critic Roger Ebert has spoken out against video games, claiming once again that interactive entertainment is not art, or at least not a proper art form, like movies or books. In a lengthy column, Ebert examined the merits of Flower, Braid, and Waco Resurrection. Ebert slammed all 3 games, describing them as pathetic, and that no video gamer now living will survive long enough to experience the medium as an art form. A rather silly PR stunt for Splinter Cell Conviction has been condemned by the New Zealand police authorities. An actor hired by a marketing agency walked into an Auckland pub and began pointing an imitation pistol at terrified members of the public, who naturally panicked and called the police. Local police labelled the stunt as ill-advised, which is putting it lightly. Musician Christopher Leary, also known as Oka, has spilled the beans in a Twitter post that his song Infotain Me has been licensed to Sony for Little Big Planet 2 on PS3. This has caused a bit of a stir, considering that Sony has yet to formally announce that the sequel exists. This is not the first time Little Big Planet soundtrack has caused a headache for Sony. In 2008, the retail copies of the game were withdrawn just prior to its release, when it was discovered one track contained phrases from the Quran. Aussie gaming clan Frenetic Array has won the Alienware Clan Challenge for 2010, defeating 7 other teams in an epic day-long event, facing off in Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare.
Now we're back and everyone can eat it.
Frenetic Array walked away with close to $30,000 in sweet gaming gear. The British online retailer GameStation could potentially lay claim to thousands of innocent souls after adding a humorous Immortal Soul clause to their terms and conditions, which must be agreed to before making a purchase. The clause may have been added on April Fool's Day, but it highlights a very important fact: whoever reads the T&Cs these days. If you're too lazy to check, you might just be surrendering your soul for all eternity.
Good game.
Torchlight has been available digitally since late last year, but now it has been given a physical form on our shelves, so we thought we'd take a look.
The small mining town of Torchlight has been plagued with waves of monsters from the depths of its caverns.
Ring! Over here! I can't hold them back much longer.
Your job is to descend into the labyrinth of ember tunnels and wipe the monsters out, only to discover that the people of Torchlight weren't the first ones to discover the mysterious substance of ember. Each new layer of the town reveals ancient ruined civilizations and mysteries and treasures of the past.
Roughly translated, that means fat loots.
Yes, this top-down RPG is all about the loots. The first thing you'll notice about the game is that it's a direct rip-off of Diablo, which is what happens when you have a bunch of ex-Blizzard dudes in the dev team, I guess. But when a game does copy another game's formula, the only thing that's left to ask is, do they do it well? And in this case, Torchlight does.
Yeah, plus with Diablo 3 so far away, it's nice to bridge that gap. In Torchlight, you can play 3 classes. The Destroyer, who's melee based, that's your tank. Vanquisher, a ranged markswoman who deals in traps, and that's your rogue, as well as an alchemist, and there's your spellcaster. As your character levels up, you apply attribute and skill points to it, but you also get fame for destroying certain types of monsters, and this gives you skill points as well.
Dungeons are randomly generated, although it's a little difficult to tell, and you reach them via portals just like in Diablo. You can plug through the main storyline, or you can complete a bunch of side quests and mini-dungeons, and Badge, I found these impossible to ignore because I can't help but wonder what special or rare gear I might pick up in there. You can also pick up gems to slot into your weapons and armor to make them more powerful.
I think I'm party to a crime in progress, and it will affect us all if it goes ahead. Let me explain my dilemma. I've been working for a privately funded laboratory, specifically researching geoengineering solutions. What's geoengineering?
That was weird. But getting that rare item is such a familiar feeling of achievement. Each individual piece of gear is represented on your toon too, and Badge, I'm gonna be a girl for just 1 second and say I like it when my toon is looking sharp.
You weren't one of those WoW players that wore low-level gear between raids just because it looked better, were you?
Everyone does that.
No, yeah, all the time. I had this great farmer outfit and a pitchfork, but you could only get it from getting a horde person to put it on the auction house and gadget stand. Good times. You'll also have a pet that follows you around and can fight by your side. Initially it's just a cat or a dog to choose from, but I transform mine into a bunch of stuff, including this blob. They level up with you, hold excess loot, and prove to be a decent ally in combat.
I found the best thing about the pet was that you could send him back to town to sell all your junk for you while you kept fighting.
Your pet has departed.
There is a lot of gear to pick up too, and not a lot of space between the two of you to carry it, so I found this incredibly handy.
My pack is full. I can't carry anymore.
I found I'd send him home and then just completely forget about him, and then he'd come back ready to fight, ready to hold more gear, and I'd be richer.
Your pet has returned.
Thanks, little guy. It's a clever mechanic because when you send your pet away, you're more vulnerable in dungeons, so it's a trade-off. He does come back quite quickly though.
I predictably took the rogue path, and my Vanquisher picked up some pretty great ranged weapons. Enchanting a blunderbuss with a gem and blasting monsters out of existence was particularly satisfying. They leave behind a pretty impressive floor splatter of blood too. It was actually quite funny.
Yes, my Chunky Destroyer invested in the dual wield skill, so I had a lot of fun experimenting with flaming axes and glowing swords, and I also enjoyed the secondary knockback effects, which has some nice area of effect, vein of fire.
The Ricochet spell was a favourite of mine from the very beginning. If aimed right, it was such a great way to take out a bunch of guys at once in an ambush. I love being able to tab quickly between raised zombies and then back to Ricochet to combine additional fighters with magical firepower. I slipped into this familiar rhythm that took me back to my WoW days.
Well, after some cool single-player adventuring action, I wanted to jump online and play some PvP and maybe some co-op, but imagine my horror when it wasn't there. The best part about Diablo was the online, so why copy everything else and skip that?
Yeah, it was a bit upsetting, but it's made by a really small dev team, and I guess having the infrastructure like Battle.net in place was just a bit too much for them. They are, however, working on an MMO set in the world of Torchlight, so I guess we'll just have to wait for that.
It is possible to download the game's editor, Torch-Ed, so maybe we'll see some community-based multiplayer hacks, or at least some original mods. Overall, Hex?
I really loved this game. It has a beautiful soundtrack, the kind of cartoony WoW-like graphics that mean you can play it on just about any decent system. I had a great time with this. I mean, I'm even keen to go back and play as a different class, and I pretty much never deviate from a rogue. I want to give it a 9, but the lack of multiplayer brings it down a little bit. It's an 8.5 from me.
Yeah, it is frustrating. There is a solid and well-polished single-player campaign here, though, but without that multiplayer, that sweet, sweet PvP I was craving, I just can't go above a 7 out of 10 rubber chickens, even with a magical merchant dog that sells stuff for you.
Good game.
Ah, the 2600, my very first home console. Wood paneling, manual difficulty settings, it even is also a video computer system.
Check this out, manual scoring dial.
That's hot. What do you think happens to the old consoles that run out of lives?
Well, you send them to this guy to get them fixed.
What guy? Oh my god.
I'm Noel Wheatley. If it's broken, I'll fix it. I first started fixing consoles about 10 or 12 years ago when I had one of my consoles break down and there was no repair service available for it. I was out of warranty, so I thought I'd have a go at it myself. I was successful with that first one and it inspired me to keep going. Since I first started, just for friends and family and other people, would have probably fixed over 40, 50 consoles. Well, my father had taught me a little bit about electronics when I was younger. How to solder, how to check circuitry, how to replace circuits and bits and pieces like that. And I've always been quite sort of fascinated by it. So when the opportunity sort of came to have a go at it myself, I thought why not and taught myself as I went along. I learned to repair them essentially through trial and error and research. A lot of the time in the early days was time spent at libraries or asking around different repair shops how they would fix these sort of errors. But now with the internet, it's much easier. You can research online, there's online manuals, there's forums, there's instructional videos. It's a much easier to repair consoles these days. Often I'll find things at garage sales or friends will just be getting rid of them to ask me if, hey, Noel, this is broken, would you like it? And I'll always say yes. And then from there, once I get them back, I'll start repairing them. And if I can't repair them, I'll use them as parts to repair other consoles. I own about 46 different consoles. And of those consoles, I've probably repaired about 20, 25 myself. I don't get to play my consoles as much as I'd like, unfortunately, because of work and life, things like that. But when I do get to play them, I really enjoy playing like the original SNES, the Mega Drive, and some of the handhelds like the Lynx and the Game Boys. One of the more general problems I find with repairing consoles is either with the power supply in the back, normally from consoles being knocked off or kicked or someone's pulled them off while they're playing. Also with the controls in the front, with the wire controllers, people occasionally pull them off. That'll cause a breakage in the circuitry inside or a break in one of the wires. It's normally quite an easy fix. Pull it apart, just find that broken wire or broken connection, just resolder it and you're ready to go again. Generally, the most difficult one is anything involving damage to the actual circuit board or any of the circuits on there. Anything where that's been damaged or broken or corrosion's worn away over the years can be almost impossible to repair unless you can find just the right part or a right sort of circuit to fix it up. With advances in technology, of course, the consoles evolve with that technology, making them harder to repair. So anything that involves sort of laser drives or anything like that is a lot more complicated. During the 80s and 90s, those ones basically had no moving parts, they're all cart-based, so therefore a lot easier to repair. Probably the rarest console I've ever come across that I've had to repair is one I've just received recently. It's an original ColecoVision from the early 80s. The ColecoVision was released back in '82, the same time as Atari released the Black 2600, and it was also the first console to ever actually have expansion ports. So while the Atari 2600 could just play Atari 2600 games, the ColecoVision could play ColecoVision games, but also had an expansion port to play Atari games for a steering wheel, for a trackball controller, and also had an expansion for an actual PC to be plugged into the front of it. It's been given to me by a friend of mine who's had it since new. I've had a quick look inside and I've already removed like nearly an inch of dust from inside the unit. Considering it's 20 years old and me living in a garage, I'm hoping purely it's just dust built up on the pins. That's all it is, it'll be a very quick and easy fix. With the older consoles, it is getting quite hard to find spare parts. No one sort of really makes parts for consoles that are 20 years old. I find that with some of the other consoles, especially the more popular ones, like the Nintendo ones, you're able to find parts online that some people are still making, especially for the original NES and SNES. They'll often buy online and use those to repair the consoles. Probably the best advice I can give is before you start doing anything, research as much as you can. Go online, check out forums, try and find any old manuals. You never know, someone may have already had the same issue and repaired it themselves. Best thing is definitely research, research, research.
Nothing says masculinity more than a massive thatch of facial hair on your upper lip. And coincidentally, no other style of facial hair is better represented in video gaming than the mustache. And here's 5 of the hairiest.
We have visual on the target. ETA 60 seconds.
If you were to ask what Call of Duty 4's Captain John Price likes to keep for close encounters, there's a good chance he'd tell you it was his outstanding upper lip warmer. This hairy hedgerow of moustachery stretches from ear to ear and covers most of Captain Price's face in an impenetrable forest of facial fur.
Big Bird, this is Bravo 6. We're on our way out. On your feet, soldier. We are leaving.
Whether or not having such a prominent lip decoration was beneficial in combat is still unknown. But damn, Price sure did look manly.
Gotcha.
He's fat, he's old, he's unpopular, but at least he has one of the most magnificent mouth brows in gaming history. Who is it? It's gotta be Karnov. The former Russian circus performer was the official mascot for the Japanese game developer Data East, and he appeared in many semi-classic video games of the 80s and 90s, including Karnov, Bad Dudes vs. Dragon Ninja, and Karnov's Revenge. Of course, nobody actually remembers just how many games he was in, because all anyone needs to know about this Soviet-era strongman is sitting right underneath his nose. Depending on his rendering, Karnov's stash is reminiscent of either Joseph Stalin or Fu Manchu, but whichever style he adopts, his facial hair is always stunning. What do you do with yourself when you're an explosive, obsessed Scotsman with a missing right eye? Why, you grow a mustache, of course.
I gotta make it out. I'm a black Scottish cyclops.
The demo man from Team Fortress 2 has a furry face accessory that's so powerful it cannot be contained by his upper lip alone. Instead, it's been forced to join forces with his sideburns to create one immense tract of facial hair running all the way around his head.
If I were a bad demo man, I wouldn't be sitting here discussing it with you now, would I?
The sheer masculinity of such a sideburn mustache combo is one of many reasons why the Demo Man is one of TF2's toughest character classes. He's also the most handsome.
Oh, they're going to have to glue you back together in hell!
When it comes to kidnapping people's daughters and holding entire cities to ransom, there's really only one rule you need to follow. Never kidnap the daughter of any man whose mustache is this awesome. As a mayor of a bustling metropolis, you'd think Mike Haggar would spend most of his time attending boring council meetings, but you'd be wrong. With a mustache as unnaturally masculine as this, it would be a crime to keep it cooped up in an office. So he takes it out on the streets and beats the living hell out of every street punk in town. Of course, it helps that Mike Haggar was a professional wrestler before he became mayor. But even so, as soon as any loitering bad guy sees that mustache on the horizon, they know it's trouble time. Number 1 on our list of formidable facial fuzz was such an easy choice we barely even needed to think about awarding them top honours. Of course, it's the Super Mustache Brothers, otherwise known as Super Mario Brothers. Go! When it comes to gaming facial hair, nobody even comes close to matching the mustachioed might of Mario and Luigi. Their near-identical mustaches have been featured in more than 100 games and have been played with by more people than any other mustaches in gaming history.
Oh yeah, Mario,
Legend has it that Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto decided to give him a mustache because it was the only way he could give Mario any facial definition using the few pixels that he had to flesh out the character. But whatever his reason for growing that mesmerizing mouth mane, we're sure glad he did, because gaming would be a lot poorer if it weren't for the mustache.
Good game!
Previously on Deadliest Hunters.
No! These floofs ain't hunters! Well, there's something worth hunting!
Monster Hunter Tri is an action RPG for the Nintendo Wii that whisks gamers away to an exotic fantasy world where the remote Moga village is deep in dragon doo-doo.
Hex.
The villagers are content to lie around in budgie smugglers and arseless chaps until mysterious earthquakes start disrupting their way of life.
Hex.
So the chief decides to hire a monster hunter to take on the sea serpent that's been sinking their fishing boats. That's where you come in.
Hex.
Yes, Bajo.
Monster Hunter and me, we've had issues.
Go on.
It's a difficult game. It's unforgiving, and I kind of dread it when it comes time to review a new one because it just has this difficulty curve that it just keeps going up and up forever.
Understandable, Badge. I had a lot of trouble too, but this game is built on challenge upon challenge upon challenge. The quests seem impossible until you beat them, at which point you feel like handing out bro fists to everyone inside. Monster Hunter Tri is hard, but it's not a flaw, it's a feature. This game is not just about fighting monsters, but hunting them. Each quest drops you into a corner of virgin wilderness, a map made up of linked, numbered zones. Running around somewhere in that bizarro world ecosystem is your objective. You have to find it before you can kill it.
And this means going equipped. The Hunters Guild will supply you with limited supplies, but you really need to bring your own, and this means scrounging around, collecting herbs, picking mushrooms, ores, honey, even bugs and fish. Then you combine them into useful items: potions, pitfall traps, flashbangs, and sonic bombs to stun monsters. There are some nifty tools and tricks you can use once you get your head around it, but there's a lot of scrounging around. A better name for it might have been Monster Hunter Gatherer.
Yeah, this game really rewards obsession. A word of warning though, there is no lock-on, you have to control the camera yourself. It's kind of like choosing a manual over an automatic transmission. Some really love the freedom that it gives you, but others just don't get it. Also, you really need to use the classic controller with this. The motion control just doesn't cut it.
Once you've found your monster, that's when your troubles really begin. You can't just spam attacks. You have to wait for the monster to move and leave itself open and then sneak in and attack. Most of them can reduce your health to 0 in just a few hits, and often you'll need to run out of the zone to quickly grab a potion or sharpen your weapon.
You can also create your own openings. Setting traps will hold monsters in place where you can get in a few choice attacks and its weak points. Dung bombs will sap a monster's stamina, making it more lethargic and prone to stuffing up. You can knock them out too. The hammer is brilliant for KOs.
There are 7 weapon classes, 6 melee plus 1 ranged. Ranged weapons have been revamped completely for Tri. They're now modular. You can swap out different barrels, frames and stocks and tinker with them for ages. With a wider range of shots including dung bullets, the bowgun is now a way more versatile support weapon.
It's worth pointing out that skills work a little differently in Monster Hunter compared to most RPGs. There's no XP, your character has no skills, it's all in the equipment. Calves from slain monsters can be forged into sets of armor that give certain bonuses, like damage boosts or heat resistance. But it's not you that levels up, it's your gear. If you want gnarlier gear, you must slay gnarlier beasts. It's a vicious cycle.
One reassuring thing is there are no classes either, so if you get sick of the great sword, you can just craft yourself a lance and play a more turtling strategy. You're not constrained by earlier choices that you've made, except for your gender and voices, obviously. While the offline mode is single player, you get a taste of co-op thanks to Cha-Cha. Cha-Cha is a shakalaka, a little pygmy hobbit thing that you unlock about 10 hours in. He can distract minions, gather calves, and even do a rain dance routine for buffs. You can customize his abilities too. He's a useful ally, though unpredictable.
Series fans will be right at home. Tri is a reboot, but the core gameplay is still the same. Plus, there are a few familiar faces like Raytheon and the Rathalos. Those frustrating egg-carrying quests are back, but thankfully they're not compulsory to progress. There have been some subtle changes under the hood. All the melee weapons are rebalanced with new moves, and the new Switch Axe has some varied infinite combos. The pig is back, and for a first in the series, you can even dabble in interior decorating.
I still can't get my head around why Capcom brought such a hardcore game to the Wii and why it looks so gorgeous. But the biggest surprise is they made underwater combat a main feature of the game, and it doesn't suck.
Granted, you're out of your element. Judging distance is hard, but you can evade fairly easily and you hardly ever run out of air. Using the camera to steer your up and downwards movements can get a little tricky, but all up, these are the least traumatic underwater levels I've played. Now, if you don't want to go on a full-on hunt and just want to bash a monster around for a bit, that's where arena mode comes in. It's a great way to learn how some of the more unusual armor skills work.
A couple of things I dug about arena mode. One is that you can do split screen with a friend, and it's so rare to see split screen, so it's good to see it get some love. Also, and this totally blew my mind, you can copy your character onto the Wiimote, take it round to a friend's place, play some quests, and then take your rewards home with you. I completely forgot the Wiimote had flash memory.
Whoa.
The online options are pretty robust too. Servers are free, and Capcom has a whole bunch of event quests set up where you can fight jumbo online-only monsters like enormous sand whales.
Shai-Hulud.
Whales, Bajo, not worms. Anyway, the multiplayer is generally more satisfying because it allows more specialization in your hunting party. You can have blade and hammer dudes up front and bowgunners pumping them with buffs from the rear. Better still, in a 4-hunter team, you only attract 1/4 of the aggro. It's way less stressful.
Hex, I want to love Monster Hunter, but I don't think I'll ever be one of those guys with a 400-hour save file. The single player is just too daunting. I will go back to it for the online battles, though. It's great fun having a hunt with friends, especially when they do all the work. I'm giving it 8 out of 10 rubber chickens.
Yeah, it's the co-op that really sets this game apart, but the solo challenges are pretty epic too. This is not a game for content tourists. You can't just cheat or grind your way to victory. You win by becoming a better hunter, and believe it or not, that's actually pretty satisfying. I'm looking forward to going back and saving Moga Village and turning some of those pesky monsters into novelty throw pillows. It's a 9 out of 10 from me.
Good game.
So, did you guess the game for this week?
It was a tough one. It was Gordo 106, the mutated lamb monkey on the Atari Lynx handheld. This was one of the first games by Max Schaefer, who would go on to work on Diablo, become vice president of Blizzard North, and eventually start up Runic Games to make Torchlight.
And that brings us to the end of another episode. Next week, we will bring you that story on violence in video games, desensitizing you to real-world violence, and we meet the man who says he has proof that it does.
And we'll be looking at what is possibly the most violent game we've played this year, the third-person shooter Dead to Rights Retribution.
Plus, this.
But how about you, Barry?
I have this.
Thank you. I'll take this then.
What is this?
Where's Barry? We had some fun with this 5-up.
Don't forget, on the weekend, ABC 3 Good Games Spawn Point, where we take a look at the latest Sam and Max game. Until next week, gamers, may your games be a good one. Bajo out.
Hex out. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
Barry Burden.